The NFL Combine is officially here, and within just the first couple of hours, the Detroit Lions have already scheduled interviews with some of the top defensive end prospects in this year's draft class. And today, we're going to take a look at each and every one of those prospects, take a look at what it would mean for the Detroit Lions to draft those players and what they would bring to the Detroit Lions in their rookie seasons, as well as the overall draft strategy implications that this means for the Detroit Lions come April 27th. So, with that being said, let's get into the four prospects as the Detroit Lions, within just the first hour of the NFL Combine, have already made multiple meetings with these prospects. Now, the four players so far that we know the Lions have scheduled meetings with are LSU's Sai'Vion Jones, Marshall's Mike Green, Ohio State's Jack Sawyer, as well as Texas A&M's Nick Scourton. Now, all four of these players are guys that will be drafted in the draft come April, but some of them will be drafted higher than others. Mike Green is potentially talked about as a top 10 prospect in this class. Nick Scourton is potentially talked about as a late day one, early day two prospect. Jack Sawyer is talked about primarily as a day two, early second round pick, while Sai'Vion Jones is widely regarded as a day three gem and a player that most NFL teams and most NFL fans just aren't that familiar with due to his production at LSU. But each and every one of these players has something to bring to the table. Each and every one of these players has something that they can contribute to the Detroit Lions. And there's, of course, a reason why each and every one of them are getting a look at the combine. Now, starting off with Sai'Vion Jones, he is a good player, standing at 6'6", 280 pounds. Spent his last four seasons in Baton Rouge, where he totaled 99 tackles, 18 TFLs, 11 and a half sacks, 5 passes defended, 3 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. And last year at LSU was by far his best, where he totaled 40 tackles, 8 TFLs, 4.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and 2 passes defended. He was really good on the edge for LSU, and even though the production may not have been as high as a lot of people were hoping for, he was still a really good player. He has the size and the power to set a really strong edge on the run game. He has the power to bull rush the offensive tackles back into the quarterback's laps and compress the pocket really well. And he has enough burst to get off the line, to get around tackles. And I think he has the skill set to do just about everything that you want from an edge rusher in the NFL. His size is one of the biggest things that he has going for him. And with that size comes elite run defending. He has a super high motor. He's got quick burst, and he just feels like a Detroit Lions player when you watch him. A guy that probably isn't going to be the most productive in the NFL, but reminds me a bit of John Kaminsky, a bigger player, sets the edge really well, does a lot of dirty work, and, will walk away with 4 to 5 sacks a season, but does a lot more off the stat sheet, does a lot more when it comes to directing the run back inside, does a lot more when it comes to pressuring the quarterback than may show up on the stat sheet. And I think he's far more of a good team player than an overall individual superstar. And yet I still think he could be a great fit for the Detroit Lions. May not start day one, may not be a player that ever starts for the Detroit Lions, but with the depth that they're losing at defensive end, this could be a day three selection to keep an eye on, as the Detroit Lions like to bolster their depth chart and add some really good talent from a team in LSU that has put out great defensive ends and really great defensive players for years at a time throughout the last decade. Second player we're going to take a look at today is Nick Scourton, a player from Texas A&M who transferred from Purdue, had a good season in the Big Ten, transferred to the SEC, and was good, but took a little bit of a step back in his final collegiate season. Now, standing at 6'4", 280 pounds, Nick Scourton had 17 career sacks, 31 TFLs, and 3 forced fumbles. In his time at Purdue, he had 15 tackles for loss and 10 sacks in his second season, being 2023. And after transferring to Texas A&M, he recorded 14 TFLs and 5 sacks for the Aggies. Statistically, did take a step back and looked a little bit slower on film, just by a step or two, but still showed great explosiveness, great burst, and I think that's his best quality. He is a fantastic athlete. He is a player that gets off the line extremely quickly. And I think he rivals some of the best first steps in this draft class, even if his time at Purdue looked just a little bit better. He does have trouble setting the edge, doesn't have the longest arms nor the biggest frame, but he is a willing run defender. He does shoot inside quite a bit to get those flashy TFLs. and does have trouble setting the edge. He is a little too aggressive at times. He does try to make the individual play more often than he does make the play for the team. And that is the biggest concern. I think he is a very talented player. He is a guy that very well could join the Detroit Lions, but I do think there is something to be said about that selfish play style, right? Not to say that he is a selfish player, not to say that, he can't be coached or anything like that, but not being willing to stay on the edge, right? Being so confident in your ability that you sometimes do take the inside shoulder and you do try to make that flashy play on the inside. And that leading to big plays on the perimeter can hurt the Detroit Lions and did hurt Texas A&M at times. And that's a big concern as an NFL draft prospect. That's my biggest concern with Scourton's tape last year, is that he just sometimes was a little selfish on the edge, and that hurt Texas A&M. It helped Texas A&M at times, but it hurt them at others. And I'm just not sure if that's the type of personality that the Detroit Lions want to bring in, especially considering some of the other players in this class are far better at the run defense while putting up pretty similar numbers to what Scourton did a season ago. One of those players is Ohio State's Jack Sawyer, a player that stands at 6'4", 240 pounds, very similar build to the Texas A&M product, and last year had 9 sacks, had 9 TFLs, an interception, 7 passes defended, 3 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, and 2 of those fumble recoveries went for scores for Ohio State. He had 2 touchdowns last year as a defensive end, and overall, I think fits the Detroit Lions maybe the best of any prospect in this class. Well, he's not nearly as big as Aiden Hutchinson. He's not necessarily the biggest edge rusher in the world. Jack Sawyer is a Detroit Lions product. He is a player that has a high motor, is strong on the edge. He sets the edge really well. He's a good run defender, has great play strength, does have a little bit of a lack of production, but has good instincts, is a little bit limited in his quickness, but there's things that we said about Aiden Hutchinson too. There were people that said Aiden Hutchinson's arms were too short. There were people saying that, he wasn't the quickest guy off the line. And those things are still true, but Aiden Hutchinson found a way to succeed despite that. And I think Jack Sawyer will be a very similar story. He's never going to be the quickest first step in the NFL. He's never going to be the twitchiest player in the world, but if you draft a player like Jack Sawyer, who's more of a power rusher, who's more of a, press the quarterback back into the pocket. He's not going to get around guys so much as he's going to run through players. But if you bring in Jack Sawyer and he's better at defending the run than what you've had, he can set the edge really well in the run game. He can contribute 7 to 8 sacks a season. That's a pick well spent, especially if it's an early second round pick. If you trade pick 28 back into the second round and you can pick up a Jack Sawyer, that's the perfect fit for the Detroit Lions. And I don't even think pick 28 is a larger reach for the Ohio State product. He does fit what the Detroit Lions really like in their edge rushers. He is the mold that they try to stick to when it comes to drafting pass rushers. And I think of all the players in this class, Jack Sawyer is the most Detroit Lions-esque player that is available. Now, he's far from the only player available, and a guy that very well may not make it to 28, but a player that could be a great option is Marshall's Mike Green. The last player we're going to take a look at today stays at 6'4", 215 pounds at Marshall. Going into the Senior Bowl, I believe he measured in much closer to about 235, 240. He put on quite a bit of weight between his time in college and his Senior Bowl debut, but last year he was fantastic. Led college football in sacks with 17.5, had 23 tackles for loss and 3 forced fumbles with a fumble recovery. Production-wise, nobody matched him in college football this year. And showing the traits, I mean, he is fantastic with elite quickness, great finesse, good hand usage, quickness off the line. He is really, really good. And while he's not the biggest player when it comes to setting the edge, he is pretty good at making those TFLs. And that's kind of the thing that we talked about with Nick Scourton from Texas A&M is, yeah, he's not going to set the edge very well. And that is a little bit of a concern, but he is really good when the run is going away from him, from shooting inside and making those big TFLs. He's not a player that's typically going to leave his assignment for those TFLs. If the run is coming to his side, he will do his best to set an edge, even though it's not the strength of his game. But when the run's going away from him, he is more than willing to shoot inside, make a massive play. That's where a lot of his TFLs came from. Runs going up the opposite side of the field, but his quickness and his ability to get off the line fast were big contributors to his ability to get production this season. And I think Mike Green is far more of a pass rusher than a run defender. He's more of a pass rusher than an all around defensive end, but that's not something the Detroit Lions can really use to not justify drafting him. They need a pass rusher, and that pass rusher that is a willing run defender is something that isn't very common across the NFL. If Mike Green falls anywhere near pick 28, I would not be surprised if the Detroit Lions make a move to go get him. But one thing is incredibly clear. The Detroit Lions want an edge rusher. They want to be better on the defensive line, whether that be trading for a guy like Harold Landry or Myles Garrett, whether it be drafting a player like Mike Green or Jack Sawyer. The Detroit Lions have their eyes in the trenches. They have their minds made up at defensive end. And they have the guys that they like. And we're going to talk about a lot of them as we go forward through the draft process. But as of right now, these are the 4 players we know that they have interest in. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. We will, of course, be back with more updates as the Detroit Lions schedule more meetings with defensive ends, defensive tackles, wide receivers, cornerbacks, and whatever other position they tend to look at. But with that being said, for right now, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have yet to subscribe to the channel, please go down below and do so. It helps the channel out a ton, and it would help us out a lot here too. So with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.